a farewell to one of the greatest power forwards of all time, because as expected, Kevin Garnett and the Minnesota Timberwolves agreed to a buyout of the final year of his contract. He is retiring. Garnett spent 21 seasons in the NBA, the 5th overall pick in the 1995 draft, straight out of high school. Garnett blossomed in Minnesota, led the team to 8 straight playoff appearances, including the 2004 Western Conference Finals. He was also named MVP of the league that season. 15-time All-Star, surefire Hall of Famer, and Garnett, always very vocal, sent out this understated farewell on Instagram.
I'm just thankful, man. I can't ever put that into words. I'm just thankful. I'm just thankful for everybody and the love. I never would have thought that people loved me like this, but for it to be reality is just something else, man. Man. We're going to be all right, man. I don't expect this to be easy, but so far, so good. Stay tuned.
Wow, these are 21 seasons. And as you know, all athletes want to go out on their terms. Right. This was not the case in Minnesota. We saw Sam Mitchell, who was his mentor, KG's mentor, not continue as head coach following Flip Saunders, another confidant of KG who passed away with a battle of cancer. And maybe these dreams of ownership with the Timberwolves now aren't going to happen. Right. But first thought now on KG leaving the game.
As you know, Vince, back in the meeting, I had so many different feelings because I had a chance to be around KG and be a teammate for half a season back in '98 and get a chance to get to know the man. A lot of times we watch the player, you see him on TV, you see him pumping his fist, you see all the energy, but he's a genuine man. Every day he stepped on the basketball court, you knew he gave you 100%. It was never a question. And a lot of times we watch our NBA day, NFL, Major League Baseball, you may see your superstar loafing a day, taking a day off. KG never took a day off. Coaches had to tell him to go sit down. That's how passionate he was about his team, his organization, his teammates. So it's one of those things for me. I know Flip passed away. I'm saying to myself, KG's supposed to come back to Minnesota and be there forever. I understand Tibbs is coming in, he's taking over, his new regime coming in, but it's kind of like last year we all were questioning why did the Lakers give Kobe all that money? And I admit right now, I was one of those guys saying, you're hurting the Lakers. But deep down inside, I respected what the Buss family did, what Kobe had given the Lakers. I was hoping Minnesota would do the same thing.
Yeah, business.
To figure out a way, let KG stay around. I mean, why can't he stand behind the bench? Why don't you make him an honorary assistant coach or something of that nature? Keep him around the organization.
By phone from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune is Jerry Zgoda, who covers the Timberwolves. So, Jerry, thanks for being with us. And I'm wondering, ultimately, when it comes time for decisions like this, was this a Glenn Taylor, Tom Thibodeau, a combination, and Kevin? How did we get to this point?
Well, it's probably a little bit of a combination, but I think it is mostly probably Tom Thibodeau. I would think that coming in, and new, it's just a matter of how things change, how the world is different now than it was a year ago at this time when Flip Saunders was alive and things were different. And now Tom Thibodeau has come in as sort of the proverbial new sheriff in town, and I think he wants to start fresh with his guys who 15 strong and who can play 30, 35 minutes a night or whatever he needs them to. And I don't know where KG was at in terms of over the summer, in terms of his workouts and what he thought about being able to play another year. He did have 1 year left on his contract at $8 million, but the guy we saw last year who didn't play much 2 years ago when they acquired him in a trade, and then last year didn't play all that much. By midwinter to late winter, it looked like he couldn't run or was having trouble with his legs. So I think it's mostly, it should be anyone who's followed the team around here. This is no surprise that it happened. The only kind of doubt was how it was going to get worked out so that it would be kind of, palatable to both sides, that you just weren't cutting or getting rid of a future Hall of Famer, and like you said, the greatest Timberwolf who ever lived. So they figured out how to do it, and I think probably all sides, particularly with the Wolves getting ready to start camp here on Monday, I'm sure it's probably a little bit of a relief.
And Jerry, with training camp right around the corner, and I think a lot of people aren't surprised with the buyout, but surprised that we're not hearing that he's moving to the front office or he's going to be around the team. All the things he's done for those young players with Karl-Anthony Towns and Wiggins and Levine, I would think that Coach Thibodeau would say, you know what, you're not going to be a player, but I'd like you to be around the team and continue to be the mentor you've been for these young guys.
Well, I think it goes back to, Flip brought him back here. I don't think he ever would have come back here if it wasn't for Flip. I know they had Glenn Taylor, the owner, and KG had a strained relationship when KG got traded away in 2007, and they sort of made up, but I don't think it was ever completely back to the way it was. And I think Tom has waited a year for this job. He's out of coaching. He's waited for a place where he can have control, where he's the president of basketball operations, him and Scott Layden here making all the calls. And I just don't think he wanted someone from the Flip era, as great as KG is and what he can contribute. I think he just wanted, his own people and his own way. And I think it was probably as simple as that. I don't think anybody's sort of the bad guy here. I mean, you've got it was a long goodbye, but Timberwolves fans got a chance to say goodbye just by him coming back here. The way when he came back after that trade at the trade deadline 2 years ago, the way they greeted him, I think he was generally surprised and heartfelt touched, the way people love him here. And even though they didn't see a lot of him on the court, I think, this last year and a half was the long goodbye. They're not going to get a chance to do it now in sort of a farewell tour like Kobe did, but, they got that, and he got, 2 more years in the league and $16.5 million he's going to take out of it. And, I guess it's probably ended as best as it could for both sides.
Yeah, Jerry, only 43 games played in returning to the Timberwolves, as you mentioned. But the playing stuff aside, I wonder if you could share with us what it was like to spend time with Kevin Garnett, what he meant to the franchise there and the community in Minneapolis.
I think, like you mentioned, his biggest influence was, the fact you have all these young guys here who are just starting to figure it out. Karl Towns particularly, Andrew Wiggins, Zach LaVine. I think there was a value to have him in that locker room with them last year, even though he couldn't always go on the floor with them. And I don't know if there would have been, much more of a benefit to have another year with them. But that 1 year, I think was, and like I said, people got a chance to say goodbye to him. I mean, we never really got a chance. He was kind of removed from the media. He would talk every so often, now and then, but he certainly did have. You can tell there was that presence in the locker room where. In the old days, he wouldn't hang out before games. He'd be sitting in there with the young guys before games, and you'd see him. So, I saw a tweet from Karl Towns today that had nothing but a bunch of dots. So he's probably feeling a little empty, but I know that 1 year was valuable. At least he felt it was for him.
No question about that. Jerry Zgoda from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, thank you so much for joining us and adding some insight on this day when Kevin Garnett walks away from the game. Colleague and former teammate of Kevin Garnett and also his mentor, as I mentioned, former head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Sam Mitchell is with us. Sam, just a unique individual. Take us inside the real Kevin Garnett from the time you saw him as a pup up there with the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Well, I tell you what, Vince, and 3D, you hit it right that nail right on the head, man. He never took a day off in practice. What you saw in the game is what he gave every day in practice. And I'll never forget, I'm coaching the Toronto Raptors, and we're in Rome, Italy. And we're playing the Boston Celtics in an exhibition game over there. And Doc Rivers and Ray Allen and Paul Pierce pulls me to the side, and they say, we need you to talk to KG. And I'm like, what's going on with KG? Is there a problem? They said, well, he goes so hard every day, and he's yelling and screaming and on people and pushing them that, he doesn't have to prove to us how great he is. We know that. That's why we want it. And I just started laughing, and they looked at me and said, why are you laughing? I said, guys, that's not an act. He's like that every single day, every single practice. He had to win every drill, every race, every scrimmage. He was just the most competitive person I ever been around and the hardest worker that I've ever seen in my life. And I've heard how legendary and how hard Michael Jordan worked. And I'm sure to be as great as Mike was, he had to work hard. But I witnessed this for 8 years every single day. And he has my utmost respect because he laid it on the line every day, and it was always about the team, never about him.
And with that being said, Sam, Kevin Garnett for 12 years stayed with Minnesota, could have left for free agency, never did. I remember him crying at half court with John Thompson interview saying that I love this city, I love this organization, I don't want to leave, and then obviously he left. Talk about how he bought all the way into Minnesota.
Well, that was, Kevin was loyal to, you could say, a fault. I mean, the fact that Minnesota drafted him right out of high school, even though there were some people down his talent and how skilled he was, and he took that as Minnesota had faith in him. And that was that bond right there. He was the most loyal person I ever been around in my life, and he took to that city. Minnesota was perfect for Kevin because it was a nice-sized city, Dennis, but it didn't have that glaring spotlight like a Chicago or New York or L.A. So it allowed him to kind of grow up, in a way without that spotlight on him, but it gave him a chance to grow and develop into the man and player that he eventually became, and he loved Minnesota for it. And, in Minnesota, it was funny. Kirby Puckett, Kevin Garnett, and Prince could walk around downtown, and people would look at them and say hi, but people would let them live their life. So it was really a great place for Kevin to grow and develop.
Yeah, Sam, I want you to talk a little bit about Kevin Garnett as a pioneer at his position. And when you first took a look at him, watching the skill set that he brought to the NBA.
Oh, Vince, I remember after the first week, he guarded defensively. He guarded Kevin Johnson, who was arguably probably one of the top three-point guards during that stretch of time. He guarded small forwards, he guarded power forwards, and he guarded centers. When they instituted the zone rule, he was the point guard at the tip of the zone. He brought the ball up in offense whenever our point guards were being pressured. He was our pressure release and all kind of traps and things the team did to us. And we ran our offense through him. He touched the ball 90% of every possession. And the reason Slip ran the offense through him was because he was so unselfish that he never was going to force any shots, and he was going to make us all better. And I tell people all the time, I played as long as I did. I played till I was 39 years old because playing with Kevin, it just made my life easier on the defensive end and offensive end.
And Sam, you know KG so well, and we've seen Kobe retire, Tim Duncan, and those guys trying to figure out what do they do after basketball.
It's going to be a great class, isn't it?
It's going to be a great class. What do you think KG does after basketball?
Man, I'm telling you guys are going to be surprised. He's one of the smartest, brightest young men I've ever been around. He has a lot of different business interests and things that he enjoys doing. I'm sure he's got a lot of things business-wise that he's excited about doing. But, Dennis, I listened to your commentary before we came on, and, he is a very proud and prideful man. I think, he wanted to go out this way. He didn't want the fanfare. He didn't want the goodbyes, kind of like with Tim Duncan. And I think Tim Duncan had in his mind that this was kind of his last year. And even though KG never said it, I think he kind of had in his mind at some point during the season this may be his last year. And I think he went out the way he wanted to go out. He came into the league, with people down him and kind of quiet and behind the scenes. And I think that's the way he wanted to go out. And at the right and appropriate time, I know what you guys are doing, such a great tribute to him. But at the right time, then we all need to sit down and pay homage because he was the ultimate team player. He cared way more about his teammates than he ever did himself.
Yeah, and to that point, Sam, there are numbers that evaluate a player, but for Garnett, and you taught him this too, it's the mentoring that takes place. And I wonder, in your conversations with him, how much he enjoyed working with the likes of Karl Anthony Towns and being on the floor and being able to pass it forward, pay it forward to these young players.
Loved it. He's huge on the history of the NBA. That's the thing that we all gravitated to him his rookie year because he walked in the door. He knew all our stats. He knew what colleges we played at. He knew the type of numbers we put up. So he was huge about knowing the history of the game. And I tell you what, he loved, Vincent, I can't emphasize this enough, he loved working with Gorgie Dang and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins and Zach Levine. He loved before and after practice. He and Karl would meet in the weight room this year at 8:30 in the morning, get the lift in, and then they would do the individual work. And KG, sat with those guys for hours at times on the plane. And I tell you what, you hear Karl Anthony Towns talks about being in that locker room. And I used to remind those guys every day that how special it was to be in the locker room and play with a living legend. Not too many of us get a chance to do that.
Well, what wonderful insight you've been able to offer us, Sam Mitchell. We appreciate your time, and you and I and DZ, all of us are looking forward to this next chapter for Kevin Garnett. Thanks for the time, Sam.
Hey, guys, thanks for the tribute to a great player and even better, a great man.
We say hello now to Steve Ashburner, our fine writer from NBA.com. And Steve also was a beat writer with the Minnesota Timberwolves for a dozen seasons with Kevin Garnett there. So, Steve, you saw the early Kevin Garnett. I want you to tell us about some of those early meetings with him and your first impressions on watching this very unique player take the floor.
Yeah, it is interesting here at the end because it makes me think about the beginning. His first training camp, his first day of practice up in St. Cloud, Minnesota, where the team went, to sequester itself for the first week. And after the morning session of two-a-days, which hardly exists anymore, I tracked him down in the locker room downstairs from the practice gym, the St. Cloud gym. And, he already wasn't that interested in doing a lot of media, but he had the headphones on. I'm sure it was probably a cassette tape in his Walkman back then. And, he'd had a rigorous first practice. And, it was like that from the beginning. Sam Mitchell, a guy named Doug West. These were veterans. And here was this young boy coming in straight out of high school. This had not been done for 20 years in the NBA. Moses Malone and Daryl Dawkins and Bill Willoughby, those names from the past. And here Kevin Garnett was coming in, obviously looking to take, he was going to take somebody's job. There's no doubt about it. He was first-round pick, and they put him through the ringer. They ran him into those folded-up bleachers, those wooden bleachers in St. Cloud, and really made it tough on him. And, he did not back down from the get-go. I remember early exhibition games where Cedric Sabalas, sort of gave him a little hip check and knocked him out of bounds. Big dog, Glenn Robinson, same sort of hazing and testing and shaking his head. He's not ready, to the neutral town fans, wherever it was, some small town, Fargo or whatever. And, Garnett he didn't care. This was his calling. He had an enthusiasm even then. It was a lighter sort of a thing. He had a Magic Johnson quality about him and his game back then in terms of he really showed the joy. And people bought into that really quick in Minnesota because it meant hope to a franchise that had six really, dismal seasons.
And Ash, you use the word joy, and a lot of times we use the word loyalty in sports. And you were there for the first 12. You remember that interview with he and John Thompson at half court, he crying, talking about, I've bought into Minnesota. I don't want to be traded, but I also want to win. And with our new NBA today with guys moving, can you elaborate a little bit more on how Kevin Garnett bought into Minnesota?
Oh, there's no doubt. I remember standing on the court with him in Oklahoma City after a shoot-around. This was obviously late in his days there, and I think that's why they had the Hornets on loan because of Katrina or whatever. And he just went on about, I'm soda, man, I'm soda. He really did take it personally. He planted a flag for that franchise, and it meant a lot to him to stay true, to stay loyal, even up to the point where they finally traded him. There was a false run there, a false start with the Celtics, and Boston didn't have Ray Allen quite yet, and Kevin wasn't interested. He didn't want to go. He was not a guy that ever, made noise that he's going to leave. You could tell he was unhappy. There were days you figured he's grinding his molars down to nothing because he was so frustrated with the supporting cast that they had, or more accurately, didn't have for most of his stay. But he took that challenge on. He re-upped when it was time to do an extension. He negotiated down basically from what he could have gotten in, grandfathered in with new collective bargaining agreements and everything. And he took less. They brought in Cassell and Sprewell. They had their best year ever. And then that went sideways after just 1 year. And I think that really, obviously those guys were getting a little bit long in the tooth, and they were pretty. They required a high maintenance, I think. And in each case, things didn't work out. They couldn't sort of hold it together. And I think that sort of, that really was when it started to go off the rails for him in Minnesota. And his last 2 years there, where they're missing, full seasons where they're missing the playoffs and in the 30s in victories and, more coaching changes. Dwayne Casey was brought in, things like that, and then Randy Whitman. And it was just like, this was the wrong direction. And I was happy for him. I actually left the newspaper world, got into the internet world a couple of months before he left Minnesota. And I was happy for him when he went to Boston because, there he was able to achieve his dream. It would have meant more for him to do it in Minnesota. I have no doubt about that in my mind. But at least he got it done, and he got it done quickly. And to me, that was the best thing.
Yeah, Ash, all athletes in all sports want to craft that Peyton Manning type exit, or maybe Kobe to a certain extent. Didn't happen this way. And it seems that sentimentality has taken a backseat to what looks like business in Minnesota. So take your best swing at what you think was going on in those conversations here at the end as Garnett's dealing with knee issues and Thibodeau's coming in as the new head coach.
Well, look, you know what? I mean, Flip Saunders, the late Flip Saunders, his passing last October pretty much changed everything. It's one thing for Ryan Saunders, Flip's son, to be able to stay in Minnesota, be on Tom Thibodeau's staff now, and sort of continue to make his way in the NBA as a coach. But for Kevin, there was a transition already in mind, and the idea that it wasn't really any kind of a secret. They couldn't talk about it officially because Kevin was still in a playing capacity, but the understanding was that he would get a sliver of the franchise, and Flip was there with a chunk of the franchise, and it was going to be onward and upward. I mean, I don't know whether some of Kevin's friends and relatives might get involved. I mean, he's well connected, but in terms of just a role and a sense of home, and that changed with Flip's passing, and Glenn Taylor's had to look elsewhere to find new minority partners. I think that whole scenario just wasn't there anymore. So, I haven't heard any details in terms of continued involvement for Kevin. I've been out of the loop much of the day, but if he's going to have any role whatsoever, or if this is actually just a total end of relations with the Timberwolves, that would be unfortunate. I mean, he has a lot to offer, and it's just a matter of whether he can find a role in that would be satisfying for him after everything he put out there on the floor, the sweat and the tears and all that stuff.
And Ash, with that said, quickly, don't you think that out of respect factor that they had a relationship in Boston, that Tibbs should go back to KG and say, look, you may not be on the roster, but I would like you to be around the organization because you're a Timberwolf for life. Quickly, please.
Yeah, but, possibly. On the other hand, I mean, I don't begrudge Tom for wanting to do things his way. This is a big opportunity for him. I mean, he's got two hats now. He's president and he's head coach. And, I think most coaches who've been around KG, from Doc Rivers, to Flip and everybody else, KG is a tough personality. And if he's not playing, maybe that, it's a tough thing to manage. I don't know. I would like to see it. The guy's number is going to be in the rafters in no time, and it's just a matter of finding carving out a role of some sort. I don't think he's going to be happy talking trash once a week with the garbage men.
Well, by any measure, it was a hell of a run. 21 seasons. He's made, $340 million or so? Who's counting? But Kevin Garnett can enjoy his life. Yeah, at age 40, he can now enjoy the rest of his life. Steve Ashburner, thank you very much.
You got it, guys.
All right. What say we take a little trip down memory lane, and it's got to be close to the heart of our colleague Rick Kamla as he gives us this Kevin Garnett retrospective.
Before the hype about the King and the Black Mamba, there was the Kid. A 6'11 phenom out of Chicago's Farragut Career Academy, Kevin Garnett burst onto the national scene on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1995. After winning National High School Player of the Year and being named McDonald's All-American as a senior, the South Carolina native was ready to try his luck in the NBA. In the 1995 NBA Draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves selected Garnett with the 5th overall pick, making him the first NBA player drafted directly out of high school in 20 years. During the 1997-98 season, the Timberwolves signed the now budding star to a 6-year extension worth $126 million. Garnett's pinnacle with the Timberwolves came in Game 7 of the 2004 Western semifinals against Chris Webber and the Kings. On his 28th birthday, the big ticket soared for 22 points and 21 rebounds as the Timberwolves advanced to the Western Conference Finals for the first and only time in franchise history. After 12 seasons in Minnesota, which included 2003 All-Star MVP, 2004 League MVP, and numerous franchise records that he still holds today, Garnett was traded to the Boston Celtics in the summer of 2007. The 7-for-1 deal is the largest number of players traded for a single player in league history. Garnett switched jersey numbers from 21 to 5 because Bill Sharman's green 21 was already retired. Then KG went to work with Paul Pierce and the newly acquired Ray Allen, and Boston's best big three since the 80s won the franchise's 17th championship. In addition to winning his only ring and only Defensive Player of the Year award, Garnett avenged years and years of early playoff exits in Minnesota. In the midst of Boston's title defense, Garnett suffered a strained right knee on February 19, 2009 in Salt Lake City. It was the first significant injury of Garnett's career. Although he returned 15 games later, he lasted only 4 games before being shut down for the rest of the season. In 2009-10, a healthy Garnett helped the Celtics make it to the NBA Finals, where they battled for 2 weeks with their arch-rivals from the West. Despite leaving Boston with a 3-2 series lead and carrying a lead well into the third quarter of Game 7, the Celtics ultimately lost to the Lakers. After 6 years in Boston, Garnett was traded to the Nets in a blockbuster deal that included Paul Pierce. KG and Pierce joined a star-studded squad that would open the Brooklyn era of Nets basketball. Ultimately, Garnett and the new-look Nets would fall to a familiar foe.
And Miami has won it! Miami sends Brooklyn home!
KG's 14th trip to the postseason would be his last. The following season, Garnett waived his no-trade clause in favor of a reunion with his old coach Flip Saunders in his old home in Minnesota.
It's perfect, man. This is, if you ever have a story and it's a fairy tale, this is the perfect ending to it.
The kid was back in the silver and black, this time as a mentor for the next generation of young Timberwolves.
It's not about how fast you do something.
To be able to have someone that knowledgeable about everything is tremendously valuable, and I love every day that I'm getting a chance to play with him and next to him.
After 21 seasons, 15 All-Star selections, 9 first-team All-Defense nods, an MVP, and an NBA championship, there aren't many career triumphs that eluded Kevin Garnett. He collected more defensive rebounds than any other player in NBA history and joins the Dream and the Mailman as the only 3 men currently in the top 20 in total points, rebounds, blocks, and steals. But to try to define Kevin Garnett by statistics is to miss the point entirely. Intangibles are what made him so great. That competitive fire, that frenzied intensity, that unbridled passion for the game. KG played more than 50,000 minutes of NBA basketball, and he played every single one like it was his last. That is immeasurable.